Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. I welcome you to this presentation. I would like to take some time here to present what Butternut has going on financially and the reasons why we are coming to referendum again after the failed referendum in November. And with that, let's get started. So, here at Butternut, we definitely work to inspire success in all of our students and our staff and work closely with our community. And we are going to referendum now because we need to. The bottom line is that the pots that schools have to draw from have either not provided enough or have been depleted. And this includes lack of state funds, decreased tax revenue, and increased expenses, which certainly we can all relate to. This slide actually just is reference for you to understand that we are not alone. And in the state of Wisconsin, there are 421 school districts. And in 2024, there were 242 referendum questions across the state. And so far in 2025, there have been 94. I believe that number will increase substantially after the April election. That is a large percentage of Wisconsin schools, actually over 70%, that have needed to go to their communities and ask for money because their schools are not able to either make ends meet, which is an operational referendum, and that is the case for Butternut, or they need to build or remodel. In the case of a capital referendum, in order to meet student needs and continue to operate safely and successfully. The first item here can feel somewhat confusing for people. Why is it that if property values are high, mill rates are lower, and the school ultimately gets a little less money in tax revenue? And while that may seem like that should not be the case, it is. Our tax revenue has decreased over the past 7 years, and that is due to revenue caps. The caps have not been adjusted for inflation over time, and um, so what we currently have in place certainly does not meet the needs. This limit means that the mill rate is adjusted down to keep local aid under that revenue limit according to the law. And I'd like to maybe just put that in a more understandable type of situation for you. Let's imagine that I run a chicken farm and the cost of producing a dozen eggs used to be $1. Certainly, we all know that the price of eggs has increased, and that's something we can all relate to. Now, let's say I sold them for $3 a dozen. That's a substantial profit. Currently, it costs me $5 to produce a dozen eggs, but I'm not allowed to sell them for more than $4 a dozen. It's easy to see that I would have to reduce my chicken flock because I can't afford to feed them, and it's not really very nice to starve chickens. Also, with fewer chickens producing eggs, that's fewer I can sell, and it's easy to see how that decreases any fund balance or savings that I may have built up, and that depletes very quickly, resulting in a deficit. And that's sort of what's happening here with schools. We are not able to keep up. What's special about Butternut School? Well, I just want to take a minute to kind of talk about that. There are many things that we compete very well with compared to other schools, no matter their size. Certainly, we have smaller class sizes, which leads to more personalized learning experience. And that's one of the main reasons that we have students open enroll in. They're looking for that smaller class size, they're looking for that other culture, and perhaps less opportunity for bullying or teasing. Those have been the two most common reasons that we have students open enroll into Butternut. There are many things, of course, that make us unique. If I had to pick one special quality, it would be that individualized and personalized education that we can give our students. Very few students fall through the cracks here. We are able to see needs very quickly and address those needs together. We are able to truly understand and know our students and their families, and therefore we are able to be innovative pretty quickly and pretty easily. And we carve out opportunities as often as we possibly can. We have a strong team of educators who work very closely together in order to do that for students. How does school funding work and where does it come from? Well, this slide kind of shows a summary. This picture shows that most schools are funded through state and local sources. There are spatterings of other sources of revenue, which we'll kind of see in a later slide. But in Wisconsin, the revenue limit started on a trial basis kind of in the years of 1993 to 1997. Uh, in the 1997 budget cycle, those revenue caps became permanent and they were put in place in order to protect local taxpayers, and they have done that. However, they also have not been adjusted with the rate of inflation, of actual inflation. And although they have been altered and increased a little bit, they certainly have not kept up. And that has left many schools, including Butternut, in an ongoing deficit. And part of that reason is because of the geographic location. We would be considered a property rich area. And the revenue limits have drastically decreased the amount of local tax aid that we can draw. There will be more on this kind of later in the presentation. But lastly, in Butternut, because of the ongoing deficit, and we are going to work into these slides, we have been able to keep operating due to a generous $10 million donation that we received from the John and Melissa Bessie family 17 years ago. Some current funding basics here for Butternut. General state aid is based on a 3-year rolling average of enrollment, and we, like many other districts, have had declining enrollment for multiple years. And our current resident pupil count is 137. So that means that there are 137 students living in the school district boundaries that attend Butternut School. And due to open enrollment, our total student enrollment is currently at 179. So in this process of counting pupils, you take your open enrolled students and you add them in. You subtract your open enrolled students who go out, and that is how you calculate your pupil count. Our 3 and 4-year-old students also do not count as whole people. They are 0.6. That's the case for most schools. If you offer 87 and a half hours of parent education, you can count them as 0.6, otherwise it's 0.5. And 3-year-olds only count when they receive special education services. So I just offer that as brief information to understand that it's not as simple as counting the number of heads who come to your district. And then reimbursement aid for those students is based on that number. Open enrollment, as I mentioned in the previous slide, has a positive fiscal impact for Butternut. In our district, we net a profit due to open enrollment. Currently, that net is 30 students, leaving us with a revenue of about $327,000. Some people have asked some questions about how parents of these students contribute and if these costs cost us money. But the reality is that they bring us money. Many of our costs are fixed, whether we have 137 or 179 students. And the added revenue from open enrollment pays for many things. And that definitely is a benefit for Butternut School. This slide simply shows our current school district's revenue mix. So if you kind of look at the percentages, our state source, which would be state aid, is at about 28%. And our local sources, which is the purple, is the tax revenue. That's at 20%. And then if you also look at the Bessie donation there in kind of the turquoise color, that's also at about 28%. So we're getting about the same in state aid as we use from that investment in order to cover expenses. You see federal sources there covers about 4%. That is mostly discretionary grants in the title programs and special education. And then the other Wisconsin district amount there in the yellow is about 18%. And that is the amount that we get from other districts for open enrollment, for educating students who come to our school but do not live in the district. The next slide just shows some revenue mix trends. You can see with the purple, green, and red bars over time, This particular graph shows 2018 to 2025. Um, and purple shows the local tax money that we get. Red shows the Bessie donation, and green shows state aid. So if you look at that over time, you can see the difference between the purple and the red bars. So as that local tax money decreased, we've had to take more from that Bessie fund. Also, you can see with the green bars over time how that has fluctuated and decreased. Um, that state aid is just not keeping up with what we need. The exception there is 2021. That was during the pandemic year, where there was a fair amount of relief money to schools in order to help us continue to operate. This slide shows the same information, but it shows that trend over a longer period of time. It shows from 2008 to 2025, this current school year. And you can see the same fluctuations in how those green and purple bars lessen over time and that red bar increases over time. And this slide is the revenue and expenditure mix. So the purple bar shows our expenses over time. You can see how they fluctuate. Naturally, we try to keep expenses as reasonable and low as we can. But revenues and expenditures in a school district have to be balanced. School districts cannot operate with a deficit. And so you see over time here, the red just shows that trend line where expenses are increasing, and then there's a decrease in state and local revenue, which is that kind of goldenrod bar, and then the increasing use of Bessie funds, which is green. So over time, all of that has had to increase. This slide is a nice visual, a nice snapshot that shows how those revenue caps have not kept up with inflation. Back in kind of the 2009, 2010 time period, you can see how those were kind of equal. And then those revenue caps were not adjusted to keep up with the actual rate of inflation. And you can see how that gap has continued to grow over time. So currently it's estimated that $3,380 per pupil in aid is lost per year. And that is a very significant amount of money. The black line, you can see on the slide there, the black line shows what was promised, and the blue line shows what was delivered through that local or the state aid. And what is the Bessie Fund? Many of you probably already know, but Mr. Bessie donated $10 million to support the Butternut School District back in 2008. And $4 million was to be invested in a scholarship investment, and $6 million was to be invested for general operations. And we did that. And like I said, we just passed 17 years. At the time of that donation, it was estimated that it would cover expenses for about 10 years. And the goal was that there would hopefully be changes in funding, state and federal funding. But we have been waiting for 17 years, and not much has changed in that regard. How does the Bessie donation impact our general fund? We started with 10 million overall. We currently have about 7 million left between the scholarship fund and the general fund. There are some limitations on how that money works. Butternut School does not have any power over how that money is invested. We just are able to use it to cover that budget deficit. And the Butternut Community Scholarship Fund, as I mentioned earlier, provides up to $20,000 for post-secondary education for students graduating from Butternut School. For each year prior to high school, students also receive a little extra bump, which is $100 per year for any of those years prior to high school. Since the start of the scholarship, students attempting post-secondary education, not all have finished, but certainly more and more have attempted to complete that post-secondary education, and that has gone from 40% to 80%. The current fund balance in that investment is about $3.8 million, and that is after $2 million have been paid out in scholarship money so far, and $1.5 million was transferred from the scholarship fund to general operations, and that was set in the rules early on, and we have transferred that money from that fund to general operating expenses. Recently, Mr. Greg Bessie, who is the son of John Bessie, has agreed to allow us to transfer another million from the scholarship fund to general operations if we have a successful referendum in April. And 500,000 would be able to be accessed this May, and another 500,000 in January of 2026. And this slide is just a summary of what it costs to operate Butternut School. There is the total budget and the revenue shortfall for the years of 23-24, and then what is projected this year for 24-25, and then the projection for next year, 25-26. The revenue shortfall for this current school year is projected at 1.1. Certainly, we work really hard to come in under that, and most of the time we do by several $100,000. But nonetheless, there is a deficit that has to be covered, and that Bessie Fund is used to cover that revenue shortfall. And that donation has protected and covered the pocketbooks of our local taxpayers for a long time. Moving to expenses, this is just a pie chart of the district expense percentages. So you can see there what we spend in each category according to that percentage. Salaries and benefits, of course, are the most expensive, as most organizations. Certainly, your human capital is your greatest resource, and that is also true of Butternut. This is the same information except in a chart form. It gives a little description of what is in each of those categories, and that's just for your information to see it a different way. And moving on, kind of piggybacking off of a couple slides ago, as we talk about local tax revenue, of course, the mill rate comes into conversation there, and a mill is just a measurement. It's a unit of measure that tells how much money you pay per $1,000 of your assessed property value. So if you look on your tax bill and you look at your assessed property value, that is how that is calculated. And the current mill rate in Butternut is at 543, which is the lowest that it's been in over 30 years. We'll take a look at some of those graphs coming up. And just for reference, for information, our 24-25 tax levy was $869,330, which in our overall budget covers about 19%. This graph shows kind of what has happened with our mill rate over time. As you can see, in 1994-95, that was when there was a capital referendum that was successful in order to build onto the school, and that increased that mill rate substantially. And then you can see how it has fluctuated over time with that severe drop. And of course, now it's at the lowest that it's ever been, at least according to these years. And the orange line shows an average. The last four dots on the graph show what would happen to that mill rate if the referendum were to be successful, what that projection is. Of course, there are some details that we can't determine at this time, but this is a very close estimate of what would happen with that mill rate. And so ultimately, we are just asking to kind of get back to where we've been in previous years. This slide shows the actual referendum question that you will see on the ballot on April 1st. And I don't need to read that to you, but we are asking for an increase in that tax levy by $1.1 million for 4 years, beginning with the 25-26 school year and ending with the 28-29 school year. And why now? As I said at the beginning of the presentation, now is simply because we have to. Uh, you can see the list of bulleted items there. However, the bottom line is this. This is really the last opportunity that we have in order to consider if we are keeping our school in Butternut or not. Because of the deficit and the rate that it's growing, we have to draw from that investment money, and it will be used up very quickly. There's about 3.2, between 3.1 and 3.2 million in there right now, and that will deplete fast. And so that gives us roughly 2 years if nothing changes. And so that is why we are asking for this amount now. Some people have questioned why we asked for 1.2 in November and now 1.1 in April. And the reason is that we have to, that's what we need. And asking for half that amount or even three quarters of that amount when you put it into the projected models does not increase our time by very much. The goal is to allow that investment money to grow. We were self-sustaining much better when that investment sat between 4 and 4.2 million. And now that it is almost a million less than that, it is depleting quickly. And some referendum details here for you to look at. You're certainly able to check those out and consider that. Just a little background information. The We had a referendum in 1994, which was successful. As I explained, that was the capital referendum for the newer part of the school. And then there was one in 2006 that failed. And then the one this past November failed. And now we are facing this current referendum. So that's kind of just a history. Certainly, that's public information. You can go out there and find it. For any school district, and you can kind of see that history of referendum questions asked over time. And what does this ask mean for you? This chart is an average estimate for the mill rate over the 4 years of the referendum. There are a couple of misconceptions in regard to the tax increase yearly. One misconception is that the increase in your school tax will compound each year, and it does not compound each year. While there is an increase, it will stay that increase. And the way that school tax is figured on a property tax bill is based on the total assessed value in each township. So currently, we can only estimate based on the 2024 tax information, as that is the most current information available. But as I said, that tax does not compound yearly. And there is a sunset, which is 4 years, and we understand that it's a big ask. And that's why we implore to you as community members to come to the table and help with that planning and really think about what you want in your town and what you want with our community school. And I cannot stress enough that this is a vital, imperative time for what happens to our school going forward and then how that affects our community of Butternut. And this is just a brief list. People are asking, of course, what are you doing to cut expenses? This is a list of what we've done so far. The upcoming goal is to reduce staffing through attrition and then consider those other areas where we can cut without hindering the quality of education for our students. And then look at other areas for expense savings. We do that very regularly. And there is a team of people who are watching what we're doing all the time. Currently, we are discussing all possible cuts and what impact they will have on the education of our students. And this next slide shows just areas where I think we, along with any school district who's facing this problem, consider expense saving options. And so there are some options, some actions there, and the impact that it would have on our students. And ultimately, we have to consider all of those, but hindering the education of students is not something that sits well with me, and certainly it shouldn't with any of you either. The The first area, of course, is staffing because it's the largest line item in a budget, as we discussed earlier, and our human capital is our greatest resource. And that puts us in a tough spot, but that is something that we certainly are looking at, and how we can do that successfully and still keep that education high quality for our students. What does a yes vote mean? A yes vote allows you to know pretty precisely what you will be looking at for 4 years. It's very predictable, and you can see what you're voting for and how much it will cost you. And as I've said in any of the community meetings, if you've been there, please come. I'm happy to set up a time to meet with you and discuss any specifics about your personal situation. And what does a no vote mean? I think ultimately a no vote has many unknowns, for our community, for our students too, but also, and most certainly for the town and what happens with our butternut community. Um, Naturally, our students would be negatively impacted, their families would be negatively impacted, and there's undoubtedly that ripple effect over time, with that no vote. What if the referendum doesn't pass? Been asked this question a few times. First of all, we look at what kind of more drastic cuts we need to make, what those significant cuts to programs and staff would be, and we look at what we are willing to do without, and how the students are affected, and that's the ultimate decision making. Um, and then, of course, we plan for that future education of our students. There are some unknown outcomes, including dissolution or consolidation. Those are conversations that we would immediately have upon a no vote. And those are conversations that we certainly have been having this entire time. Well, there will be discussions about all those possibilities. Something to think about is that we don't know truly what neighboring districts have going on. And so, in the case of our school district ending, um, basically you're going to pay school tax somewhere. So if our school district property lines get reassigned, you pay school tax to whatever school district you are now assigned in whatever situation they have going on there, with their local tax levy. And why would dissolution or consolidation not save taxpayer money? Well, that's mainly the point I just made. We don't know what's going on. Taxes are going to increase, undoubtedly. We've all experienced that for a very long time. Um, but taking time to do your homework and consider and find out what those other districts have happening is very important. And of course, you pay school tax, whether it's to Butternut or whether it's somewhere else. This slide, while I don't need to read it, shows that it's easy to see that there would be a impact of a failed referendum. It would impact all parts of Butternut School and the community, and there are some items to maybe consider. And coming up, where and when to vote. Election day is April 1st, 2025. The polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. There is a website there if you need that to find your polling place. And please vote. No matter if you're a yes or a no, please vote. And what can you do? Well, you can learn about this information. Certainly, we have 2 public meetings left. One is Sunday, March 9th. That is a lunch and learn, and that may be passed already. I'm not sure. And then March 18th is the Village of Butternut at 6:30 p.m. So please come, attend board meetings, ask your questions, call me, email me. My contact information is coming up on a slide. How you can connect with your legislators. Here it is. I have some letters for your use. If you'd like them, please call the school office. I am very happy to get those to you. Senator Romaine Quinn is usually willing to listen, and also is our representative Chance Green. Their contact information is there. Please let them know your concerns as we have about school funding in the state of Wisconsin. Questions or other information that you need or want, please reach out to me. My phone number, my email is there. There's a QR code on this slide that connects you to our referendum information, including this presentation. And I wish you all a great day.